With Murder Drones being officially over, I knew I wanted to do a ranking for the show, and you guys decided that a character ranking would be more fun than an episode ranking. So I arranged the characters in a chart from least interesting to my absolute favorites, and we're gonna rank them. My name is Deep Cut from Cartoon Universe. Subscribe here on Random Universe for more fun side content like this, and tell me how much you hate me because of how I ranked your favorite character in the comments down below. To start, at the very bottom of my tier list, we have the F rank, but I'm gonna give the obvious warning here that I don't really hate any of these or any other characters. I kept the letter grades for simplicity's sake, but I don't actually hate any characters. Because of that, the F rank is characters like Thad, Khan, or Uzi's teacher, with Uzi's teacher definitely being at the very top of this list. He's not my favorite character by any means, but out of all these side characters listed who don't have much purpose, he definitely is the funniest. I think the moment that truly won me over for him was actually in the finale where he's grading Uzi's essay, which is just her rambling saying I am God, over and over again, for which he left very serious notes of respect and appreciation. And these were all funny enough characters. Khan had his moments as Uzi's dad, like when he just let Doll into the house while she was hacking En's memories and the two ended up in a giant battle. But as far as all of these very fun characters go, these three are definitely the least important to me, so here they are with their F rank. Moving up from here is my personal D rank. This is almost worse than the F rank in some ways because characters here are basically supposed to be more important than I'm giving them credit for, but I'm not speaking very highly of them here today. In this rank, I put both J and V, the disassembly drones. This will probably be a bit controversial as I know these two are fan favorites, but there are other characters who get so much less screen time that I just love so much more, and these two just feel a bit incomplete to me. I don't like to criticize shows, so keep in mind that in the context of the entire ending, Jay's ending was actually really cool, but it's only cool because of how incomplete it feels. She chose to side with Sin and the Solver over her friends, but in the end, she was wrong to do that. Sin, of course, ended up losing, but in the world that followed, Jay had no reason to keep attacking the others, and likewise, they had no reason to attack her even though she had sided against them. Instead, in this new world, Jay is just alone. The last we see of Jay is just her fixing up the old spaceship, indicating she's gonna go out into the empty universe and just explore, or rather drift aimlessly since she has nowhere to go. I guess what I mean to say is this is a wonderful execution for a character that ultimately doesn't feel too thought out when looked at this closely. She was created to just be a bully that existed in the disassembly group, but she and V are so close to each other in terms of personality for a lot of the show that the two kinda end up blending into one blob of disposable side characters, with both being killed and then being brought back. They're both a testament to how a good writer can take what is essentially a satellite character or a prop character and give them a sense of depth, but when compared to the other characters, it's easy to see how they don't stack up, I think. Next up is the C rank, which in a grading scale is about average. In this rank, I put both N and Uzi. As the main characters, it makes sense that they'd wind up here for me, as they're both a balance of interesting but also not too crazy, so that the side characters can have their more exaggerated stories. Uzi and N being here in many ways is a compliment to the characters as a whole, because as the most average characters to the audience members like me, they fit the bill perfectly for being the main characters in their world. They don't become too big for their story or too small compared to the other characters, which is something that can happen when side characters become more popular than the main characters in the show. Uzi is great with her dramatic backstory involving her mother and the scary hints of the Absolute Solver controlling her as a child, but it isn't something presented as so crazy that she has to outshine Doll, who has an even darker yet nearly identical backstory to Uzi. I definitely place N ahead of Uzi in this chart, however, because the crazy backstory he had as a disassembly drone immediately made him the more interesting character in the main duo, especially before we realized that Uzi and Doll were going to be developing something like psychic powers. But as far as they go ranked compared to the other characters, I'm putting them here in the C rank being completely average because after introducing these two characters in episode 1, the other characters only got cooler and cooler from there. In the B rank, I would put Uzi's mother Nori, and just ahead of her, Doll's mother Yiva. The Mombots are together just one of the most interesting subplots in the show and set up such an interesting mystery to keep us anxious before revealing their real relationship. Uzi and Doll had such a tragic dynamic themselves, both being victims of the Solver virus and just trying to understand the horrible transformations that they were going through. They could have been best friends relating over this, but due to the different paths that they were on, Doll was already on attack mode. Early on, there was a fear that Uzi's mother Nori was a bad person who perhaps did something horrible, maybe even blowing up all of the humans on Copper 9. On the more personal scale, some photos from the test lab even showed Nori perhaps being abusive to Eva in the experiments, with Uzi fearing that her mom was just some bad person who set all of these events in motion. It was great to see Eva treat Nori like a close friend when we finally got to see them interact in flashbacks, doing her best to help her and care for her as they were forced to do these experiments. Eva recognized that the Absolute Solver was the one responsible for hurting her and not Nori, but it still felt like we didn't quite get an ending to Eva's story. While she is recognized as being killed by V with her corpse just sitting in Doll's apartment now, a lot of fans want her heart to have survived the same way Nori's did and be out there somewhere being happy or even constructing a new body for herself. Together, they are two mysterious mombots who became more interesting than Uzi herself, but they are not the most interesting characters in the entire show, so let's head up to the next rank. Now, the A rank isn't the final rank on this tier, as we also have the S rank above it, but these are some pretty awesome characters still. First in this tier, I place Alice, which may be a bit of a surprise, and some of you may not even remember who she is at this point. Alice was the wicked cool drone involved in the same experiments as Eva and Doll, who had been left behind at the worker drone camp after everyone else had moved to the bunkers. While there, she went around getting all of the drones that had been infected by the Absolute Solver and performed crazy experiments on them. Through this, she was able to find ways to actually fight back against the Absolute Solver, such as the use of magnets on the head of a drone and putting all of the cores in the oven so that they get too hot to do anything. She's practically not even a character in the show, only having that appearance for one episode, but she was such a wild card that she's basically the only thing I remember from that episode. I mean, she took an infant drone network and turned it into a monster that helps her perform crazy surgeries. Alice is unhinged, and she deserves an A for sure. But above her, I also put Tessa. Tessa is an interesting character, as she's the only character in the show that is a human, and so much of what we think of as Tessa isn't really Tessa at all. We see a genuine glimpse of her in the beginning of episode 2, coming home from the dump with Sin, but following that, the big flashback episode that elaborates on her is based on the faulty memories of J and V. They aren't wrong about her or anything, but in the narrative that we're given, things end up changing because of Uzi's influence, and this isn't exactly the real Tessa we see. Later, we would supposedly meet Tessa wearing a spacesuit, but we would eventually learn that this was actually Sin just pretending to be Tessa. Being worn as a suit by Sin is in many ways important to Tessa's character. She is someone Sin wanted to be, and while we only saw one genuine glimpse of her, everything Sin does is built around what she learned from Tessa and twisted it into her own identity. Tessa is essentially interesting because all of these fake versions of her that exist in the show, with all of them being based on this idea of a real Tessa being important to everyone in the cast. She's a character who just doesn't exist on some level, and yet she has this larger identity that even works as a mask for Sin herself. Now, Tessa is one of the most popular characters in the show, but there are some characters that I just think are ultimately more interesting than Tessa, even though some of you might disagree. First on the S rank, and some of you are gonna hate me for this, but it's Lizzie. Hate me all you want, but Lizzie is a top tier character. Lizzie has the most interesting behind the scenes story going on, where she clearly develops some sort of fixation on V, despite her being a murderous drone who ate her best friend's parents. She's not just hilariously unhinged with how she treats her best friend Doll, or how she just invites a murderer to prom where everyone could get eaten. She also just has this nice ending where she actually gets what she wants and seems to live a bit more of a chill life. While she can still be the mean queen that rules the school, now that she has V, she seems to have just chilled out and become another fun character for everyone else to hang out with. Finally, the more serious characters on this list starts with Doll, or the Babytron Queen 1000 as they call her in the memorial PowerPoint at the end of the series, the Shadow the Hedgehog of murder drones. Doll was immediately made interesting just by the virtue of having cool hair, something only a few of the drones actually had, indicating that they would become more important characters as the series progressed, but no one could have guessed just how important Doll would be. Doll became the sort of shadow version of Uzi's story that existed in the background. In many ways, the less Doll appeared in an episode, the more interesting it was in regards to her character. While the prom episode did a good job of showing us exactly who she was and what she was doing murdering her friends and drinking their oil, it was the episodes that followed that we learned so much about her goals based on the short moments that she appeared, such as when we saw her in episode 5 spying on Uzi, or the quick battle she had in episode 6. Despite her coming in while Uzi was hacking En's memories in order to steal the bug from her, she ends up feeling a bit bad about stealing the bug remote because she sees Uzi as someone who's giving up her own cure in order to help others, something Doll is simply unwilling to do. She's a character that I have to imagine has so much fanfiction out there just detailing her side of the story. And if not, shame on you as a fandom for not doing that, because there's so much potential for how this could play out, even in bigger ways with its own twists and turns that fit perfectly into the existing show. But because of that mystery, Doll is essentially my favorite character, and definitely my favorite actual drone at least. But if there's one character who is perhaps above her, I'd have to say it was the Absolute Solver controlling Sin. The Absolute Solver in the body of Sin was a uniquely fascinating villain in my opinion for all of television, and even with her hyped up to be more of a world-ending kind of eternal evil, the more emotional revelations we got about her at the end of the series made her even better. Sin is a character who clearly has a fascination with Tessa and her drones, and becoming Tessa in order to trick the drones into thinking she was human was a pretty twisted plan. It had all these inspirations from stories about demonic entities that wish to become human and simply just roleplay as them, particularly because of love or lust for a specific human, with Sin seemingly not wanting to actually control the universe, but to have a safe world to exist with En in. In the end, she of course got this by becoming part of Uzi, getting to be a part of the merged personality that En himself adores. Someone even better for Sin to have become than Tessa, but the twisted way that she got here by destroying all of humanity makes for a pretty epic story. But what do you guys think? Obviously, I'm entitled to my opinions, but what if I wasn't? What would be my punishment for this tier ranking if you were in charge? Let me know the laws you would create against people like me in the comments down below, and thanks for watching one last Murder Drones video. See you guys in the next show!